Ingersoll is my guest. He is the Vice President of Engineering with Gravitational, a company that makes a product called Teleport, something we've been playing with here at SCaLE. Welcome into the program, sir.
Thanks for having me.
So, start with this. I literally just last week on the show was talking about a really fantastic product that I was playing with that would allow me to essentially administrate servers through SSH through my web browser. I get here to SCaLE and I find out there's a way better solution, and that is Teleport, and I've not stopped playing with it. For somebody who hasn't heard of it, give me the 30-second elevator pitch. What is Teleport?
So Teleport's a mechanism to use short-lived certificates to not have to manage SSH keys, and as part of doing that, we have our own implementation of SSH that does full session recording of everything that passes through. So we basically take your identity from some sort of central single sign-on, we encode it into a certificate, and then allow you to access your infrastructure without having to worry about losing your keys.
What are some of the advantages in using a product like Teleport as opposed to just opening a terminal and using standard SSH?
So standard SSH was really great. If you look at OpenBSD and what they've done, they were sort of the torchbearers with making sure that sessions were encrypted, and it really is kind of a very old Unixism. The reason that we didn't use it directly is because we had to basically get the actual recordings. We had to prove that we didn't see data we weren't supposed to see. So the other kind of critical thing was just make it really, really easy to use short-lived certificates. So there's nothing inherently wrong with keys, it's just that they're actually hard to manage, right? A lot of people don't realize that those 2048 bits of data that's sitting on their hard drive is like the keys to the kingdom in most cases, right? So it's just kind of ease of use along with these nice accessory functions to be able to deal with large sets of machines and to kind of reason about how the security of that stuff all ties together.
Now that's interesting because what you're saying essentially is that we've actually increased security, and at the same time we've decreased the difficulty to be able to use this product because this entire product runs inside of a web browser.
Yeah,
we can.
Yeah, so kind of one of the fundamentals is just that if you cannot understand something, if it's too complex, you're going to have a really hard time securing it. So we very much just focus on doing one thing and one thing really, really well, and we just have this very strong belief that for someone to actually have a secure system, they need to be able to reason about how the system itself is working, how the security part of the system works. And if you look back at kind of how X509 or the notion of cryptographic certificates works and how PKI works, it's one of the most secure ways to do it. And so for us, it was kind of a no-brainer that's the way that we should institute this security. And then it has these really other nice properties that go along with it, such as this cryptographic material has a time to live, so it automatically expires. And then another nice thing about Teleport as a system relative to OpenSSH is because we're fully managed PKI, the machines and the agents, or the servers and the agents kind of form a cluster and they communicate amongst each other. So you also get a couple of really nice properties where you can address things by labels. So if you have nodes that are coming and going, like if you have spot instances or like a load balancer with an auto-scaling group with EC2 instances coming and going. In an older style of using SSH, you kind of have to manage the certificates that are the keys that are assigned to the hosts as well. So in a Teleport ecosystem, because they're all connected and all communicating, it's just another nice property, something you don't have to think about, and it also allows you to kind of assign unique labels to things and also work on things by groups, by like sets instead of singleton instances.
The public key infrastructure, PKI as you're calling, that's a very interesting technology and it's very powerful and you can really get lost in it, but give us the kind of brief overview of what PKI is and why it's so valuable.
Oh, that's a tricky one. It's one of these really sort of well-tread topics in the security world. Mm-hmm. So it's the basis of, when you say HPS or a secure lock in your web browser, that's transport layer security, TLS, or what used to be known as secure sockets layer. Mm-hmm. So the premise is that there's some sort of master somewhere and then there's a web of trust. So if you have the public part of someone else's certificate authority, anything else that has been signed by that certificate authority, you can verify or know for sure, like a mathematical kind of precision, know that the assertions or the data that they're saying is true, is in fact true, has been vetted by that company. That's why if you're connecting to Microsoft.com and it shows you that encrypted bar, you know that whoever's built your web browser and has built in this kind of trust of the issuing CA. When you go and find one of these issued certificates, you know for sure that you're actually connecting to that party. So it's both about establishing trust and then about using that to establish a secure connection in flight.
That's awesome. I understand that the security is greatly increased just in this PKI infrastructure alone in the way that you implement that, but you actually take it even one step further. You've implemented two-factor authentication. What forms of two-factor are available with Teleport?
So in a teleport world, a lot of the kind of large-scale users or the enterprise users, they'll already have single sign-on systems. So something such as like an Active Directory or just the general taxonomy of their human hierarchy is in some master system. So in most of those installations, the local kind of representation of a user within a teleport system that doesn't actually exist. Teleport's just told to trust that source of single sign-on and then leverage that to generate these certificates. In other organizations or smaller teams or folks who just don't want to have, like they don't want to be connected to a single sign-on, there is a built-in user database, and that user database includes TOTP, so time-based kind of token, and also U2F, so the quintessential example of that is a YubiKey. So basically the notion of an additional layer of security by something you have rather than something you know. So you know a password, you have a key, like a hardware token, so that allows you to just have this additional factor of assurance, and just one of them escaping doesn't matter because you still have the other one protecting you.
Not dissimilar to like an ATM, for example. Now, a lot of people are turned off by products that require them to install something on the, I guess it would be client, I guess it would be server side. But from the server side, if I have a large cluster of servers, and maybe I don't even own them, and so I have very limited access, and the decision tree is outside of my control, Teleport still allows me to access those servers through a traditional SSH model, doesn't it?
Yeah, so we're based on all of the kind of longer existing IETF standards, and OpenSSH is actually, or SSH protocol is version 2.0. So we speak the native protocol, and you can actually, you don't have to use our TSH client, and you don't have to use our Teleport server component if you don't want to. You can take the key material that you get when you log in and load it into a normal client, or you can also export your certificate authority and tell your instances of OpenSSH daemon to trust that CA, just a single configuration change, and then it'll let you log in. There are some additional properties to certificates and how we encode identity that OpenSSH is not going to understand. So a role-based access control and different kind of bit flags about whether to allow port forwarding or X11 forwarding, that it doesn't. So you lose some capabilities, but generally, yes, because we're based on Google's implementation of SSH within Golang. Like we don't do our own crypto, we just inherit theirs, and because they're all standards-based things, any typical tool that uses SSH works with Teleport, and then Teleport itself works with all the other off-the-shelf SSH things.
The binary to get Teleport up and running was literally a function of downloading a Go binary, running the thing, and all of a sudden I have a working server. I mean, it took me less than 10 seconds. It took me longer to type the commands than for them to run.
Yeah, that's kind of the beauty of open source. We have some people who have adopted it who then have contributed back to things like FreeBSD ports, things like Mint Linux, things like Brew for your OS X package manager. So you literally can run Brew, install Teleport on your Mac, and just boop, you have the client. It's kind of just a property of open source. Like it ends up in places that are surprising or unexpected. And it's just the beauty of the Apache 2 license and it just being out there.
I set up Teleport and I went out to lunch during SCaLE, had it running on an actual production server, and I was playing with it, and I said, well, I have to go get this file. So I did what I ordinarily would do to get a file on a server, which was I go to upload it to a server so I can WGET it back down, because I assumed that was the only way to move the file through Teleport. As I'm working on it, I come to realize you've built SCP right into the web client. Talk to me about that.
Yeah, so the web interface is really for the population of people. You either like find yourself on an Android device with Chrome, but you don't have a native SSH client, or you have a population of users who don't normally use SSH, but you still want them to inherit all the nice kind of security primitives that you get from a Teleport install. So along the way, we've had folks say, hey, you know what, our Windows users or people who would traditionally use something like Putty or one of these other kind of clients you download from sketchy origins, or like the code base hasn't really been audited, you're not really sure where it's coming from. It's really built for those folks, and then the ability to upload secure up and secure down, it's just something that we wanted to expose because it's another kind of use case where you just find yourself needing to upload and download a file. All you have is a web browser. Secure CP, it's really just copy over SSH. It wasn't that hard to do, and it's a pretty nice, clean implementation.
It is a fantastic feature. It was a game changer for me. That was the point for me, honestly, Abe, where I went from, this is kind of a cool thing, to this is a must-have, I can't go back now, right? The ability to get into a server and move a file onto there from my web browser, that is just a fundamental functionality that I can't get back away from, and it's very much appreciated. Talk to me a little bit about the differences between keys and certificates. I know you and I were kind of chatting about that off air. What is the difference between a key and a certificate for somebody who doesn't know?
So a key is basically bare cryptographic material. A certificate adds metadata around that cryptographic material. So there's a component where the key has been signed, so you sort of have this delegation of trust happening there, and there's additional metadata that can ride along with it. So in our case, we're encoding the access rules, and we're also encoding some of the options. The critical kind of like the thing that like why InfoSec professionals love certificates more than keys is because they usually include a time to live. You can set the expiry to be like 10 years in the future, but a lot of these organizations, and descendant of this paper written by security researchers at Google called Beyond Corp, the notion is that you would not have a perimeter. You would treat everybody, every device, every phone, that you wouldn't have VPNs. You just basically do this point in time decisions about access on the fly. And using short-lived certificates or certificates that have very tight expiration timelines, so like matters of minutes or seconds, is kind of a critical component to doing this at scale. So you know you have really strong cryptography, and then if you know if something gets compromised, all you have to do is sit back and wait. Wait for however long the time to live was on that object, and once that time expires, you're done. So the typical example we use is if you have like a regrettable departure at a business, and the time to live on the cryptographic material is like 30 minutes, you would take an individual into a room, sit down and talk with them for 30 minutes, and even if they kept their laptop or if it's left at home, whatever, 30 minutes later, it's no longer valid, right? So this is just a critical part of, it's. I think the best analogy is Mission Impossible when Tom Cruise gets the message and it self-destructs. That's the way to think about the difference between keys. Certificates self-destruct after a given amount of time.
I love that example. I also love that the fact that you are truly built for enterprise and you're truly built for scale. The vast majority of the audience is going to play with this stuff and download it because it's open source and it's available for free, and they like that. At the same time, there's not an insignificant portion of them are going to go back to their bosses and say, listen, we want to implement this at a scale, and their boss is going to say, okay, well, what kind of support can I expect? You guys are ready for that.
Yeah, we're a traditional enterprise software company in the sense that this is commercial off-the-shelf software. We're not even a SaaS company. We have a philosophy that we don't believe in holding people's keys. We think people should hold their own keys. So it is open source, but then a lot of companies will we want to use open source. We like that we can go and inspect the code. We like that we can verify that it's correct. We'd like that we can have security professionals go and look at it. But we also want the peace of mind to have sort of solutions architects come in and show us how to properly set this up, to talk to us about our overall architecture, to talk about different workflows or APIs and how we can integrate this with typical day-to-day things we're doing. There's very interesting things that people ask for, so features or just threat profiles that are unique to them, where they want to double check what they're up to relative to kind of the security best practices that are out there. It really is it's one of the most fun aspects of my job is talking and seeing kind of the inside of all these different organizations, seeing the problems that people are encountering and then helping them solve them, right? Because a lot of folks, when they get these compliance regimes that come in, or they get like an auditor who's coming in and say, hey, you have to do these things because it's the current way you're doing something is insecure. That's probably the biggest payoff, is allowing people to continue to work the way that they want to work, continue to use low-level tools, but be able to tick the boxes on these compliance things. So instead of having to open tickets and do screenshots and prove evidence that they've done certain things, in a teleport adopters ecosystem, they have recordings of everything that's been done. They literally will give a login to the auditor and say, hey, you want to verify what we did? Go look for yourself. Just go play the recording. Right, so that's a huge time saver. It's a huge kind of peace of mind to just be like, okay, here's this 300 item checklist, and 100 of those items are just going to go away when I implement this thing.
It's one of those things that I totally glossed over because I'm on to so many more of the cool features that I have forgotten about some of the basic functionality that is in fact very cool. The auditing function, it records every single session, so you can go back and say, what did that tech do to that client's computer to screw up this thing or the other? And I can go back and click and I can play through that and see exactly what steps he did, and I can prove to the client, hey, listen, we didn't do anything wrong. We did exactly what we were supposed to do. We followed the documentation. Here's the actual recording of him entering those steps.
Yeah, so the way to think about this is if you've ever used Screen or tmux or any of these session sharing things, we do that at the protocol level. So besides kind of locking it down by virtue of having an exact forensic recording of every byte that came in and out, we also allow you to open it up. So the exact inverse of that is sharing, right? So one of the other really cool properties, it kind of has use cases for learning, use cases for like incident response, use cases for like pairing, is you can literally take like your URL within your browser where you have an active session, a normal Unix terminal, paste that in like chat or text over to your coworker. If they have the same permissions as you, they can open that, click it, and boom, instantly be dropped into the exact same shell. It's recording and it's enforcing all these security things at the same time, but it's this, like, you can have as many people as you want join. I probably haven't seen more than 3 or 4, but theoretically, I don't think there's an upper limit.
That's so cool. I have not played with that. I'm going to. As soon as we wrap up, you better believe I'm heading over to one of those tables. I'm going to check that out. One of the enterprise features is the ability to tie in with some of the directory controls.
Yeah, so single sign-on is like if in large organizations, instead of having this proliferation of distinct user accounts, they want to have one record, one human like identity record. Like the quintessential example is your login to the payroll system. So they want, when you go and access individual kind of servers, or when you go out and hit any kind of enterprise application, the ideal scenario is that you're using your single sign-on, your single identity, your real identity, instead of something like the deployment user or EC2 user or something like that. So because we're encoding that in keys, in certificates on the fly, and then we have this recording happening on the way in and out, you get this peace of mind that everything that someone has done, all these actions are actually tied back to the same identity that you use to pay them like as employees.
What are some of the options in the open source world if somebody says, hey, that single sign-on thing sounds great, but I don't really have a need or an interest in enterprise solutions? Is there another alternative?
Yeah, so a lot of open source teams who use GitHub as a open source teams who use GitHub as like the way that they do software development. We support GitHub OAuth. So if you have teams defined there, you can connect your teleport installation to your GitHub account or to your GitHub team, and then magically kind of delegate access to particular sets of servers based on GitHub team membership. So that's available in open source. We have a bunch of examples of how to install it, both like Helm charts if you want to run on Kubernetes, Terraform recipes for various cloud providers, even the real simple things like Vagrant up commands, or just like a quick start, like here's a 2-line shell script, here you go, get started.
One of the things I love about coming to SCaLE specifically is I get to meet with people that really are good stewards of the community. They're not just people that are there to make a buck off of the Linux community. And when I was talking to you, you're one of those people that are doing that. You actually run a blog, and you have some really interesting topics on here. Microservices, containers, and Kubernetes in 10 minutes, how to use certificate pinning to improve the UX, gracefully restarting a program without downtime. I mean, these are some really cool material that's available for people completely for free, and you're publishing this on your website. Talk about that.
Yeah, so one of the bigger challenges when you're heads down and really focused on some of these things that are like not that sexy to a lot of people. They think these are solved problems, or unless you have a real specific use case, sometimes it's hard to discover it. For us, it's really the things we want to write about because we're passionate about it. We want to like help people solve these problems that we solve, but there's also a big component about just getting out there in the world and driving awareness that we exist and that we're coming up with these cool solutions to hard problems.
I had a chance to check out some of your blog articles the other night, and there are certainly some that talk about what you're doing at work, but there's a lot of them that are company agnostic. They're just good information for anybody that wants to learn, so I invite everybody to check it out. We'll have a link, of course, for you in the show notes, podcast.asknoahshow.com. Abe Ingersoll, VP of Solutions Engineering, thank you so much for taking the time to come on the program. We'll get you back real soon.
You're welcome, Noah. It's my pleasure.